Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Her Story, brought to you by Chamber Fayetteville. My name is Angela Belford, and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by Ashley Harris. Ashley, would you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Well, good morning. Hi, I'm Ashley Harris, and I have two different roles, I guess, here today. I am Vice President of Marketing and Communications with Ozarks Electric and OzarksGo here in Fayetteville, but I'm also on the Fayetteville Chamber Board or Chamber Fayetteville Board as well. So I get to wear two hats today.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about how you got into marketing, or how long have you been with Ozarks Go and Ozarks Electric?
Yeah, so I started in my degree in public relations and advertising at PR at the University of Arkansas, and I actually started my career on Capitol Hill. I moved straight to Washington D.C. after graduation, and I was the scheduler and office manager for a congressman in D.C. I worked for a lobbying firm. Ended up having a lot of different roles with the lobbying firm and did some marketing for some of our campaigns there. And then I moved back to Arkansas, still working in politics for a while, but at some point it was really time to get back to what I had gone to college for. And I took a job at the University of Arkansas, and I did marketing, recruitment, things like that for one of the colleges and alumni relations, things of that nature. But then I was like, okay, I'm not really doing what I went to college for, so I went to an agency, and I worked for Mitchell Communications Group for
Mm.
several years while we were building and growing and working for big brands like Walmart, Sam's Club, Tyson Foods. So that was a great ride, and that was definitely straight PR. Is what you're doing. Absolutely, brand management, brand reputation, a lot of different marketing campaigns as well for our clients. I'm now working for Ozarks Electric, OzarksGo. I've been here for 9 years. And it's an 80-year-old company. We were started in 1938. And so it's a huge legacy company here in Northwest Arkansas. We serve customers all over Northwest Arkansas and Eastern Oklahoma as well. So we serve about 90 and growing, which is a lot of customers. So my member base is very large, but I do public relations, media relations, marketing, and also government relations as well. So every single thing that I have done in my career up to this point has led me to this role, and I couldn't be happier with it. It's a great place to work.
That's fantastic. I have not gotten the opportunity to interview everyone, but the interviews that I've done, we end up talking a lot about the idea of, like, you never know when this job that you had, like, early in your career, you're like, oh my goodness, here it comes back around full circle. Recently, we had the U of A graduation. And so, if you were to sit down with a brand new ad PR graduate, what would you tell them? What are some of the advice that you would give them?
I think being nearly 53 and having a career, I worked with all women at the PR firm that I worked in. I mean, it was a women-owned company, women-led company. Of course, we had men that worked there, but it was very woman-dominated. And now working in an industry, in the utility industry, energy is very, very male-dominated. And I think in both of the roles that I had, it really just the culture was a little bit different. But I think I was very intimidated to walk into a role where it was very male dominated. And I learned very early on that, my words had weight. Things that I had to say and the expertise that I brought into that role carried just as much weight as everyone else's did and still does to this day. So I think for a young graduate coming out of college, it's really important for you to know that, carry your own words and own them. Transparent communication is very important, but they do have weight, and your voice says a lot. And you have to be confident in your own voice and feel free to share it.
I find that very interesting, and I would hope that other women find this encouraging. But the fact that you started on Capitol Hill, which arguably, I also just turned 53 at our age, very male dominated, still a very large number of males in those on Capitol Hill. And for you to then still this late in your career feel a little bit intimidated, that's actually encouraging to me, that's something that at different points in our career we're all going to face.
That is absolutely true. And I will say it's helped me because, starting out at 21 years old, working on Capitol Hill, you just kind of had to have no fear. I was really concerned about it, but hey, newsflash, 21-year-olds are running the country. So when I go to DC, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I'm going back in 2 more weeks to meet with our Arkansas delegation and our Oklahoma delegation to talk about things that they're important to the electric cooperatives and our members. And I feel very confident walking into that room now because all of the staffers, I used to do your job, and I know how hard it is. But I feel very confident in talking to our delegation, the senators and the congressmen that represent us, just because I do work in a male dominated environment, but they do listen to us. And so don't be intimidated. You have something to say and your expertise really does matter.
I have been to Capitol Hill a number of times, but recently had the opportunity to go to the Arkansas Capitol. Just the type of advocacy
Oh
I've
yeah.
done for the last 7 or 8 years
Mhm.
makes way more sense at the national level than it does at the state level.
Right.
And I was alarmingly surprised to find that our Arkansas legislators do not have staff, and they're having to do this whole thing on their own,
Mhm.
and the amount of compassion that I finally had for them, because I was just like I used to be like, "What are they thinking?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow, they don't have time to
They don't
think."
have staff. They
And they
don't.
don't have staff. I had no idea. That was something that was super interesting, which leads me to my next question. I don't know that I've ever talked to somebody that was a lobbyist, and if I have, they don't go around sharing that information. So, can you just give us a glimpse into what that was like?
Oh, wow. Well, it's really interesting the way I worked then in the mid 90s and the way I'm working now because we worked for the lobbying firm that I worked for in the 90s was we advocated for like Citgo Petroleum, British Petroleum, so a lot of gas companies, and they paid us to pound the pavement in DC and advocating for the things that were important to them, and we were paid to do that. Now, in my role, when I go to talk about Ozarks Electric or Ozarks Go, there's a different confidence in that because I'm advocating, I'm not being paid by another company to talk about, what's important to them. I'm talking about what's important to our members and important to me in my role. So it's a very different type of approach I think that I can take. It was really fun. I will say in the 90s, it was a whole different deal. The three-martini lunch was definitely a real thing. And my new boss took me to lunch that first day and they just started ordering drinks. And I was like, this little girl from Arkansas. I'm like, no, ma'am, I think I'm okay. I'll just have iced tea, But the way, business was done back in the 90s was very Mad Men, very, very, very Mad Men. But it was a lot of fun. We threw a lot of great parties, but we also did a lot of hard work. And I can remember working on a campaign event for President Clinton's reelection. At the time, we raised the largest amount of money ever for a presidential election campaign, our little lobbying firm. And it was a
Wow.
huge deal. And I remember, changing into my formal gown in the bathroom. I'd been at the office for 26 hours, and I
Wow.
walk into that big room like, gosh, look at what we did. So a lot of sense of accomplishment. Robin Williams walks in and where am I supposed to sit? I'm like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And, a lot of hard work and a lot of determination and a lot of people believing in me, and me believing in myself. And I think that's the lesson.
I love that, and I appreciate you letting me lean into civic engagement because both you serving on the board for Chamber Fayetteville as well as this government relations, what I heard you just explain in being a lobbyist versus being in government relations is that you were able to put your heart and soul, even though you put blood, sweat, and tears in it when it was your job to be a lobbyist, there feels like there's a heart and soul, and I'm curious if you can talk to people who maybe feel intimidated about going and advocating with legislators about, "Oh, I'm not a trained professional,"
Right.
and what I've seen is that they actually wanna hear our heart and soul
They do.
more than they want to hear. So if you were to speak to somebody who's like golly, there's a lot going on in this world and I would love to get involved and I would love to be able to advocate for the things that matter to me, even if I don't have an official job. Maybe I actually met somebody that was advocating for animals when I was in Little Rock. And
Sure.
so like just how the laws for taking care of just stray animals. And she was like wanted to talk about that. So how would you encourage them in that journey of civic involvement?
I think if you wanna be involved, the first thing to know is they work for us. You know? They
Yes.
work for us, and they are elected to do a job, and, we can go and advocate to them the things that are important to us, but it is their job to carry our message forward, whether that be an impactful floor speech on something, an issue that we're working on right now that hits very close to home with Ozarks Electric and OzarksGo is with FEMA and the electric cooperatives. We are not an investor owned utility. We're owned by our members. And, we don't have this special insurance when we have, 7 tornadoes that go through Northwest Arkansas where we can, the last tornado that we had, like, that was really bad last May, we had worked 24 hours a day. We had our line workers out there it took 7 days to get some of that infrastructure put back up. It was very, very devastating. And with FEMA not being able to fund us, that's how we pay for what we're going to do. It comes out of our pockets or our members' pockets. And if the FEMA funding is going away, then we have to figure out how to pay for that. So some of the advocacy work that I've been doing in DC recently is really talking to our congressman about that. And Senator Langford's staff, Senator Langford from Oklahoma, really asked us last time we were there, just said, we really want some of those anecdotal stories. We want to hear the stories from your line workers. And, did they meet someone in a rural area
Mhm.
that, and so we have real life stories that we can tell and just humanize the situation. And the staffer said, Senator Langford is really wanting to champion this new FEMA reform bill. And we're going to use your story. So he's going to talk on the Senate floor about this, and he's going to make speeches, all across Oklahoma talking about why this matters, and how put a real face on what happens when we do lose power and you have to go to a very rural area and, put those poles back up and get the lights back on. And, people that have an oxygen tank that keeps them
Yeah.
alive. There's real stories like that are really, really important to share. And like you said, if you want to advocate for stray pets, you have a voice in DC. Call the congressman scheduler and you make an appointment and you can go.
I love that because I think that when I was new to advocacy and the first time I went to Capitol Hill, I thought I had to be all suave and I thought I had to be all like, I have to know all my stats and my facts and my figures, and they're going to question me on all of that. And then it was really fun last year when I went, I made sure that I learned the stories of the people that were in our group.
Right.
And I do a lot of housing equity
Hmm.
advocacy, and I say, I, as a middle aged white woman, have a megaphone and I get to hold it up in front of people, and I like to hold my microphone. And so I was strategically picking people in the room. I'm like, why don't you tell your story of public housing? Why don't you tell it and how you're now a commissioner? And so
Yeah.
I kept pulling those, and you could tell the legislators were like, oh, I'm so tired of the facts and figures. They want to hear the heart and soul. They want to hear the stories. And I think that people forget that. I mean, as marketing professionals, we know storytelling is the best and
Right.
most effective way to communicate. And then we forget, I think, when we get into those halls of government.
Well, and one of my mentors in public relations, always said, you can be a great storyteller, but it's also really important to be a great story knower. So you've got
Yes.
to know the story. And, across marketing, public relations, advocacy work, any of that, you can tell your story, but you have to really know the story. And I think that's really important to bring that human face to it and really tell the real world stories, because those living in the beltway, they want to get out of it so bad, but they get stuck, and we have to paint a picture for them.
I love that. I'm supposed to be asking you some questions. I can't wait to use this podcast because there's so many people that I want to encourage women, especially,
Hmm.
to be able to advocate for themselves.
Sure.
So, Northwest Arkansas is growing fast. And as some of the population estimates say that that we will double in size before 2050. So, as we grow and change, what is something about Northwest Arkansas that you hope, especially Fayetteville, that you hope never changes?
I always tell people are wanting to know about Fayetteville. What is it about Fayetteville? And, when I first moved here, I moved here as a young, college freshman embracing Fayetteville in 1991. It was a very different place then. And I moved away for several years. And when I came back, what was so refreshing is that yes, Northwest Arkansas had grown, Fayetteville had grown, but it had still maintained its charm. I go to
Mm.
Fayetteville Farmers Market every Saturday morning, and I love it because it now it's expanded. Thank you, City Council of Fayetteville, for expanding the farmers market because it's going to get it even bigger, but it still has maintained its charm. And I think we've been blessed with a lot more amenities that we have in our region and in Fayetteville, which is great, especially for those college students that come and they fall in love with Fayetteville and they don't want to leave. They want to stay. And we have a lot of job opportunities that are going to be available to them, and with new companies coming in. And I think that's what's so wonderful about Fayetteville is that the charm is still there, but we are able to grow and have those opportunities for individuals that still want to live a small town life, but also have the amenities that we do.
I love that. We haven't really talked about your work on the Chamber Fayetteville board. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? What does that look like? And what does that role look like? I know some people, but I don't know what that means to be on that board.
Well, it's it's a wonderful, fulfilling experience that you get to see. We work with the city quite a bit. Back on the advocacy work, we will advocate special issues to the city council. We have a lot of things that we want to do for the businesses that we serve as a chamber. And I think, in a career, especially for women, we have a lot of things that we have responsibilities for. I'm a single mom. I have a college student. I have a high school rising senior that's upstairs right now studying for a final exam that he takes in an hour and a half. That's what real life looks like. And so I think it's important for us to find other things, other outlets for us to lend our time. And the Chamber of Fayetteville has definitely been that opportunity for me because I get to work with the pillars of the industry across Northwest Arkansas, in Fayetteville. And I've got to meet so many wonderful people. And I think, just all of us sharing the voice and, doing things for the city of Fayetteville and for the business owners in Fayetteville is just very, very rewarding. Just so rewarding. And, Jennifer Irwin being our new chamber president has brought in, a fresh life to what we're doing. And, she's had to make some hard choices and she's made some really great decisions and she's moving the change in such a, proactive way. She is leading by example. We are a very progressive chamber and, there are a lot of opportunities that we are going to be working with the city on and all of our other businesses to make it an even better place to live. And so that's been so rewarding to be working with the people that I get to work with on the chamber board.
One final question before we drop into our rapid fire. In your career industry specifically, do you think the glass ceiling is still there?
I think it is definitely there, especially, where I work and as I said, in a male dominated environment, it is definitely there, but that doesn't mean we can't shatter it.
Great answer. All right, rapid fire questions.
Okay.
The job you wanted at 10 years old.
Oh, this is funny. I wanted to be a horse trainer at Oaklawn.
Okay,
That's what I wanted to do.
I love it. Beach, mountains, city, or staycation?
Oh, beach, 100% all day
Mm.
long.
A bonus hits your account today. What's the first thing you do with it?
Oh, I'm taking my kids on an epic vacation that has a beach.
Love it. Describe your work wardrobe in 3 words. Go.
Oh, corporate wear comfortable.
Very nice. The one goal you have not told anyone yet. Are you ready to say it out loud?
Oh gosh. Embarking on 53, you start thinking about retirement. And I don't ever want to retire. The people at Ozarks Electric are like, okay, it's time to go. But I would love to have an opportunity to teach at the University of Arkansas after retirement.
That's fantastic. I I taught a year at the university, and it is fantastic. I was able to teach a marketing colloquium, so it's a good goal. I love that.
Very fun. Very fun.
Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those of you tuning in to Her Story, I hope you stay tuned for our next Her Story.